Welcome back to the 716 Sports Podcast, recording here live on the week of June 24th. We have an exciting show here for you today, just here on the heels of the 2019 NHL Draft. The Buffalo Sabres making 2 first-round selections. You got Dylan Cozens at number 7, Ryan Johnson at number 31, and 2 players who we'll get into depth about here. We'll talk with Chad DeDominicis of Die by the Blade about the draft as a whole and the moves, the lack of moves made by the Buffalo Sabres here this weekend and what that means for the overall roster here as they approach now free agency coming up here right around the corner.
Hey, Jeff, you know what we should do?
What should we do?
Everyone wants to know about Dylan Cozens.
Yeah.
And there's probably someone that we could talk to that knows a lot about Dylan Cozens. I think we should talk to his coach from the Lethbridge Hurricanes.
You know,
we should have a chat with
like a great idea.
Brent Kisio.
Yeah, Brent Kisio, the Lethbridge Hurricanes. Let's go right to that, right out of the gate, 716 Sports Podcast. Welcome back to the 716 Sports Podcast. Very excited here on a very hot topic for Sabres fans all around to be joined by the coach of the Lethbridge Hurricanes, Mr. Brent Kisio. Coach, thank you so much for taking time out of your night here, spending it here with us.
Hey, no worries, guys. Thank you.
So we've got you on the show here today because there's a lot of Sabres fans all around who learned the name Dylan Cozens here this past Friday night, and we figured we would reach out to the person who maybe knows him and his playing style the best out of anyone on the planet, you having coached him now for 2 full and part of a 3rd season. And I think the question on everyone's mind is, what kind of player is Dylan? What can we expect from him here when he becomes the newest member of the Buffalo Sabres?
Well, he's a real good hockey player, guys. He's a good two-way player. We've had him play wing. We've had him play center. He can play both positions really well. But the thing that we've seen his game really, really change is the defensive side of his game. He's always been real good offensively. For the last year, he rounded out the defensive side, and we moved him to the middle, and he did a great job there. And he had tough matchups on a lot of nights, but obviously he's done a real good job, and going 7th overall shows that.
Now, you saw him come in a couple years ago and now goes 7th overall in the NHL Draft. How has his development gone with your program and your team, and what has it been like, coaching him and being part of that process?
Well, it shows how hard he works off the ice. I think in our league, he was drafted, I believe, around 17 or 18, and now to go in the National Hockey League draft at 7 just shows his progress. And he came in at 15 years old for us and played in playoffs as a 15-year-old and stepping against guys from 16 to 20. He ended up tying a game for us in Game 7, the second round, and we won in overtime. And for a kid to step in at 15 years old and do what he did for us that year in the playoffs, showed his poise, his composure, and what he can do. And he's just gotten better and better every year since then. And obviously last year was a real pivotal part of our team. So
we've heard a bit about his size, that 6'3" and 180 is what he's listed at here. Justin actually has his player page pulled up for us. But we know that he's obviously far from growing, but does he play a big game? Does he play like, do we expect that size to translate to the NHL? Obviously the guys will be bigger, but does he play big for his body? Does he play like a 6'3", 200-pound guy?
Yeah, he does. He competes. He wants to win. You can just see his puck battle. He's whenever he loses a puck battle, that gets to him, and he's a guy that wants to win every battle, doesn't matter where it is on the ice. But his frame, he still has a lot of weight being put on. He's, like you said, he's 6'3", 180, or I don't even know what he is for weight now, but his body frame, he can still put on 20 pounds easy, and when he does, watch out, he's going to be a beast on the ice.
No, so we're watching the draft here in Buffalo on Friday night, and the guy goes on stage, and got Bob McKenzie comes on the screen. He's like, he's a big guy with kind of average skill, which took us back a little bit now watching that back. Just looking at his playmaking now, he has 50 assists for you guys last year. I take it that he's a very talented puck handler and maybe a little underestimated there on the skill.
Well, he doesn't have average skill, so I'm going to tell you that right now. If it's good that everyone thinks he might have average skill, but he doesn't. He's a guy that whenever someone doubts him, he always seems to rise up and prove people wrong. And I think he's probably going to do that again. And I think Buffalo fans have a lot to be happy with that pick.
Now, as he continues his development here, probably won't see him in a Sabres jersey for a little bit. Is there anything that you see in his game that will be important to him to continue to develop as he gets ready for the NHL game?
Well, I think it's all aspects. He's a real rounded player already. But as you know, at the next level, everyone is. And for him, it's just going to be getting stronger. He's already fast, but he can obviously get faster, but that's going to come with strength. And the next level, you just got to be such a bigger man to play that game. And that will come with time with him, with how hard he works.
So the Sabres have a new coach now in Ralph Kruger, and well, I'm just curious, maybe your best relationship with him is the coach to player relationship. So can you give us some insights to that as far as conversations that you have off the ice, leadership type stuff, his coachability? Like, what can you tell us about that as far as from a coach perspective to Dylan Cozens, the player? Is he the kind of guy that you love coaching, and is he the kind of guy that's going to be a leader in the locker room, those types of things?
He will at some point for sure. He's a guy that obviously I love coaching. I've been very privileged to coach him for the last couple of years. What I like about him is, as a top guy and a top-ranked guy, you walk in our locker room, you would never notice it. He's a guy that he's learned a lot from our older guys, and he's spoke up when he had to, but more been quiet and showed what he could do on the ice because he's been a younger guy in our league. I think this year, if he's back with us, we'd really see him step up and lead our team a lot more in that aspect. But I appreciate the fact that he came in with a top-ranked guy and never acted that way. He's a really, really humble kid that comes from a great family, and you can see this way he acts on and off the ice.
So we've had people ask us when they found out you were doing this here tonight, is there an NHL player comparable that you see, or is that a kind of question as a coach that you're not too big of a fan of?
No, I think there is. There's lots of. I think Bergeron would be a real good comparable. He's a solid guy, and obviously Bergeron is the same way, and I think you'll see that in Cozens. I don't know where they have him playing, whether it's center or wing, but he's a kid that can play both, and he's a real good player from all aspects of his game. And I hope people doubt him, because when people doubt this kid, watch out.
Well, thank you so much, Coach, for taking time here with us tonight. Coach Brent Kisio of the Lethbridge Hurricanes, who's coached Dylan Cozens, the new Sabres for number 7 overall draft pick here over these last couple of years. And thanks again, Coach, for taking time here and spending it here talking about him with us.
Hey, thank you guys, and I'm telling you guys, you Sabres fans out there, you'll be excited when you see this kid. He's a hell of a player.
And thanks again to Coach for joining us here tonight. Justin reached out to him not too long ago. He was very open and receptive to doing the interview, and we're very thankful to have him on the show here tonight and give his insight. There's really no insight on a player than a coach's insight, truly. You see a guy who sees a player day in, day out, knows his strengths and his weaknesses. He's seen Dylan grow and become, a guy they brought in for a couple games in a playoff run to a star player, a top 10 draft pick. So many thanks to Brent for taking time out of his night here and talking about Dylan here with us.
Yeah, and you hear in his voice, as we're wrapping up, and hey, see you later. Hey, guys, don't sleep on this kid. This is a coach of a hockey team, and it's his kid, so he's going to pump his tires. But, this wasn't the typical coach speak of, he's a great kid all around. Everything's going to be good. This is all, he said the leadership will come with time, right? Mm-hmm. He kind of said at this point he's a little bit of the silent guy, and he leads with his play on the ice. But when it came to the end of that, he was like, hey, guys, he's an excellent hockey player, and be ready to watch him play in Buffalo.
Well, to be fair, he said he's been quiet because he's always been a younger player in the league. And if he's there next year, he'll be one of the older players in the locker room, so he expects him to.
I think my point was that I give more value to the words when he does say,
I understand.
Hey, sit up, guys, this is important, because when we asked him about leadership, he didn't pump the tires. Oh, he's the best leader I've ever had. He said he hasn't really filled that role yet, but guess what? This kid's a really good hockey player.
And that's my kind of leader, too, on a team. Not everyone has to be the loud, vocal guy. You need a couple of guys like that in a locker room, I think, but having a guy like that who is just one of those work hard, lead by example type of guys.
Chris Drury.
I leave that interview with Coach Kisio feeling very positive about the mental makeup of Dylan Cozens. And I think that's the perfect segue into really this entire show. So we left the show last week maybe building a dream roster, but we knew that there was a couple pieces from this Sabres team that were missing because we didn't know what they're going to do with the first pick. And there was names thrown all around the place. You talk about Cole Caulfield and many, many names up there. And then the Sabres end up getting a guy who was projected as high as 3rd, as low as 8th or 9th, and Dylan Cozens, the first ever NHL first-round pick from the Yukon. And my question is, does this make him the first ever athlete who is excited to come to Buffalo because there's way more to do downtown than there is in the entirety of Yellowknife, Yukon?
Didn't they say there's 25,000 people in the city he's from, and that's the booming metropolis of the Yukon?
Yeah, it's the biggest city in the Yukon. Mm-hmm. Way, way up there. You were mentioning you when you went out to Alberta, you talked to some people about what's north of there, and they said basically nothing. So he's from the basically nothing. We have multiple restaurants in the same little condensed area.
There will be more people in the arena on a Friday night than in his city.
Yeah.
Damn you, Steve.
Sorry, I didn't mean to steal that one from
those
you,
lines. So, I mean, it's all jokes aside. I think it's awesome to first of all, for him to be the first player from his area to get drafted so highly. He has very high words from his coach. Now, of course, none of that means squat if he doesn't come out here and become a key member of the Buffalo Sabres. You don't draft a guy in the top 10 to just, move around like a certain other prospect center has for the entirety of his small career with Buffalo. Not naming names. Casey. But, these are guys, too. The tough part about analyzing an NHL draft, other than looking at, what they can be, and we'll talk to Chad DeDominicis about this in a little bit as well, about what he thinks about Dylan and the other players that the Sabres are bringing in here. But these are guys who you're probably... This isn't Rasmus Ristolainen. This guy isn't on the ice playing big minutes for you at your home opener. This is a guy who's got a couple more years of development, at least a year, you would feel, before he is on this big roster. And that's what makes handicapping these young players so difficult is, the coach talking about, he has to put on some more muscle and get to game shape, and the speed of the game picks up significantly. How well does every individual player take to that? All that being said, how do you guys feel about the Dylan Cozens pick? Are you excited about it? I know at the time where everyone has their guy, they want the Sabres to pick number 7 overall, but it's settled in a little bit. What do you guys feel about Dylan Cozens?
So I like the pick. At first, I had to jump off the cliff moment because, they had all the top guys. They had Zegras, they had Caulfield. I was picking Caulfield. He dropped because of his size, obviously, but there's some nice players there. And I didn't even know much about Cozens, honestly. I didn't know much about him, so he was not on my radar. And at first, Dylan Cozens, I don't even know who that is, to be honest with you. But anyways, and then I looked into the guy more, here at the bottom, and it sounds like, okay, they traded Ryan O'Reilly and just drafted Ryan O'Reilly. That's my
younger.
Yeah. That's my original thought. But then I was talking to Jeff at work today, and I literally said to him, I love the pick if his ceiling is like Patrice Bergeron. And the Coach Kisio just compared it to Patrice Bergeron. So right now, I'm happy. I like it. What are your thoughts on the pick?
I think, too, his size is going to be a key component because 6'3" is big. Not huge, but that's big for a center. And
good size.
Yeah, and I'm not a medical professional even close, but, men supposedly grow until they're 25, right? Men don't reach their...
They don't peak.
They don't finish developing physically. And this kid is, 6'3" and tiny. You see him, he's kind of like a...
Wiry.
Yeah, that's a good word. He's wiry. And Coach said he should have no problem putting 20 pounds on. I had no problem putting 20 pounds on, but that's not the same thing. But I'm excited to have a 6'3", 210-pound guy with the hands that he seems to have to not only pass but finish. The guy, you watch his highlights, and I know it's WHL, but this dude just rockets the puck into the net, which is pretty exciting. So I'm excited for this pick as well. It's not the flashy guy, but I think that's okay because who else wasn't like the flashy guy? Chris Drury. Chris Drury in his career will probably never be called flashy, but he was awesome.
Another thing is I don't know much about the player, like I said, and so I'm hanging on every word Bob McKenzie says at the moment. He's walking across stage, and one of the first things he says is not a very skilled player. Has some skill. So I was like, oh no, but then Coach Kisio,
he was taken aback by that.
Average skill, and it's a player that has 34 goals and 50 assists.
50 assists. That does not happen at any level on accident. 50.
Now,
apples.
One thing I noticed watching, I've probably watched maybe 45 minutes of tape on this kid now. I never watched anything about him before Friday. But it's not always he's not a great playmaker, stereotypically. He's not out there just putting dimes on people's tape. The way that he's creating assists, though, is a way that's way easier to keep up as you gain levels. He's fighting for the puck. He's winning loose puck battles. He's making life difficult for defenders, forcing them to create turnovers and getting goals that way. I see that all up and down his tape that you can find online. That's not to say there's not a bunch of really nice shots and some great passes in there as well, but it's way easier to just be a hardworking guy and keep that hard work going. It's not as easy to just pick up the speed of the NHL right away. So that's encouraging too, as I think he's got a really good nose for the puck, and he's not going to be a guy who's afraid to go in behind the net and make a defender's life miserable for a couple minutes to create a play.
Well, and Chad talked to us, sorry, a spoiler rod of water here, but when Chad mentioned his skating, he said he's not necessarily fast, but he's a straight-ahead kind of guy. And I've heard people talk about certain players that just kind of chew up ice. They don't glide. They're not fancy. Like Jeff Skinner is super fleet-footed, right? He's able to turn in 4 different angles and carry his speed through center ice.
Sure.
Jack is a power skater that in 3 strides is at full speed, and it's pretty. It's smooth. Then there's people who their feet just, Connor Sheary, just absolutely chew up the ice. But the difference is Connor Sheary is 5'10", 6'7".
Right.
And this kid is 6'3".
He's going to cover a lot of ice really
just
quickly. With
chewing
those
through the
strides.
ice, especially in the neutral zone. So I don't mean to spoil our chat with Chad, but he mentions that, and I'm excited for that because instead of maybe they'll finally get rid of the drop pass back to the blue line and he'll just carry it through the neutral zone. I don't know.
Well, now you figure at this point you've got 3 centers who Buffalo plans on being their top 3 guys. Whether that fleshes out, we'll ever see. You got Jack obviously as the number 1. You have Casey slotted in as your number 2, probably.
Vladimir Sobotka.
Vladimir Sobotka.
Sorry. Oh.
And then Dylan Cozens. And they're 3 guys who, for me, fill kind of different roles. Obviously, Jack is an elite offensive talent, but if there's ever been a drawback, and you see it on Twitter, sometimes he gets a little lost defensively and lets things happen. You don't worry about that because he's a 100-point player, but he's not as defensively minded as someone like Dylan Cozens. Now, maybe Dylan Cozens in the NHL is never going to be an 85-point guy. Maybe he's a 50 to 60-point guy who plays a great two-way game. You heard his coach compare to Patrice Bergeron, a Selke guy, a great two-way player you can rely on to win. How desperate were the Sabres for a guy who could take defensive zone faceoffs last year? We heard the term Vladimir Sobotka is great at defensive zone faceoffs on this podcast far too many times for my liking. I never want to think that sentence again as long as I live. And Dylan Cozens is a guy that if he turns out to be the kind of player that his coach expects him to be, that the Buffalo Sabres management group expects him to be, he could be that guy who you can, all right, we're up a goal, there's 10 seconds left and we're shorthanded. Dylan out there, take that face off, win the game kind of situations for a guy. And then you have Casey Mittelstadt, who's a little bit smaller, but faster, elite stick handling if he fleshed out through the player that they expect him to be. And that's 3 entirely different guys who are centering 3 entirely different lines. And how many times have we seen teams who have finally hit that straight of the middle? I mean, that's what Chicago did when they were good. It's what the Kings did when they were good. It's what the Penguins especially did when they were good. They build from the center out.
That's what Edmonton tried to do.
Well, that's what Edmonton's trying to do, but they only have 1 good center, so it's hard to do from there. They need 2 more. Well, they're 33% of the way there, and I'm so proud of them.
Maybe they'll trade for...
Well, when they were drafting first overall for, 5 years in a row or whatever?
Yeah, they were the Detroit Lions of drafting centers. They just kept drafting one until one of them was Connor McDavid. And so now, yes, the wings are important. You need good wing players. That's why you want Sam Reinhart to be here, or maybe even playing center this year. That's why you want Jeff Skinner to be here. That's why I want Victor Olofsson to be up with the big club. But if you have an elite center in the middle of your line, Connor Sheary's a better player. Everyone's a better player by an elite center. Just look at everyone's numbers when they play with Jack Eichel. And I'm not going to sit here today and tell everyone in the room that I think Dylan Cozens has the career trajectory that Jack Eichel does. But he certainly has the tools that if he develops correctly, he could be a great asset, a top 6 players. It'll be fantastic. And then that makes that second line so much better. And that's a big question for us. We talked about it last week. We talked about what are we doing for second center? We moved Sam Reinhart there. I think that might still be the move this year, but Jason Botterill's move is like, a year or 2 down the road, I think Dylan Cozens is there.
When people were talking about Jeff Skinner numbers, one of the things that would come up is Mark Stone. And the first word out of people's mouths, the first sentence was, well, Mark Stone plays a better two-way game. That's nothing against Jeff Skinner, but Mark Stone made 9.5 and got paid a little more. And the reason people pointed to was that he was more of a 200-foot player than Jeff Skinner. And that takes nothing away from Jeff Skinner because he fills a role and he fills it incredibly well. But
Sabres need a finisher.
The value of a two-way player that is responsible in both ends, you see it with players like Ryan O'Reilly. You see it with Patrice Bergeron. O'Reilly was the first player in 5 years not named Patrice Bergeron or Anze Kopitar to win the Selke.
Sure.
And the difference is you were talking about a 50 to 60 point guy, and I don't mean to speak against what you said. Every Selke winner has 100 points now. Selke winners put up 90 points now, which is absurd. But like a number, not to pick at the scab, but like Ryan O'Reilly this year, I heard a number, and this could be way off. He took 4 penalties this year.
That's great.
So he is the Selke winning great defensive forward who we know in Buffalo was always on the zone, defensive zone faceoffs. And in an entire season took 4 penalties. Stuff like that is crazy that I got on a little tangent there. But point is, if Cozens can be half the two-way player that we're talking him up to be, he'll be valuable to this team.
And maybe if they get better wingers there on the second line, then maybe Cozens can be that 90-point guy again. Who knows? But he certainly has created a lot for the players around him on Lethbridge. And 50 assists, you don't get 50 assists accidentally. You get 50 assists by knowing where your players are. You get 50 assists by working hard and having great puck sense. Bob McKenzie knows a lot about hockey. I'm not here to tell you he doesn't. I think he may just be shortchanging Cozens a little bit in his assessment as he went on stage there. But time will tell more than anything. Before we get too far into the rest of this here, because we already started talking about it a lot here, let's take a moment, talk to our friend Chad DeDominicis from Die by the Blade. He's going to recap the draft. We'll talk a little bit about some moves that weren't made, and then we'll get back and continue our evaluation of the Sabres draft here this year. Welcome back to the 716 Sports Podcast. Excited here on this very hockey-centric episode to have one of the leading voices of Buffalo Sabres social media from Die by the Blade, Chad DeDominicis, on the line here with us. Chad, thanks so much for taking time and joining us here tonight.
Not a problem, guys. What's going on?
So before we get too far into this, and we just talked about it, we did our show last week where we went and rebuilt a Sabres roster on Cap Friendly. Did you have any thoughts about how well or how poorly we did in constructing a realistic or hopeful roster for the upcoming Sabres season?
Yeah, I mean, I like the Zucker trade. That he's a guy I've kind of had my eye on for a while here. It looks like it's weird because in the beginning of the summer, like the off season, like he was definitely being traded, and then it got quiet, and then all of a sudden it's like, oh no, he's going to be traded again. So it's kind of going back and forth, but I like it. I mean, it's moving Ristolainen in there makes sense. Like the way you put it, it's a money for money deal, so it makes some sense there. So I like that move. I like the Donskoy signing. I think it's a little bit high, if I'm being honest, a 5 for 5, but if your point is you have to overpay him to come to Buffalo, sure, but I don't know if it's that much. I think like from like Evolving Wild had like his projection at like 3 or 4 years times like 2.75. So maybe it's like 3.5, 4. I don't think it's the 5. It's kind of a bit much, but I guess I get where you guys are coming from with that. And yeah, I mean, I like the moving the Reinhardt to center thing. You guys know I'm a fan of that. So that's, so I'm all aboard.
We did that solely because we knew we were having you on the show this week and wanted to play up your favor.
So I mean, that works.
So we got you here on the heels of draft weekend. Sabres pretty quiet other than making their picks, but what do you think about Cozens and Johnson and the whole of the Sabres draft here this year?
Yeah, Cozens is I think it's a fine pick. It's personally for me, I would have preferred Zegras, but Cozens is fine. He's a big centerman. He plays with speed. He's strong on the puck. He's strong on the forecheck. He has a great shot. He has some skill in his game too. So, one thing I told somebody when you think of Cozens, not to get people overly excited, and then I forgot who it was, but somebody else, like one of like the prospect guys, tweeted the same thing today. But the way to kind of think about Cozens when he has the puck coming to the neutral zone is he kind of reminds me a bit of Nathan McKinnon. He comes through with that speed and that force where he backs defenders off. So, if he can kind of hone in on that, if he can keep that creativity, he can use that speed to his advantage. That's really what his game is. His game is a very quick, he plays the game fast, which the Sabres kind of need that. For as much as quick as Jack Eichel is, he's not a player who necessarily, I guess, on the rush plays that fast. He kind of likes to slow down sometime with the play develop, where Cozens is an all-go guy. So that's kind of a nice mix to have in your lineup, when he does get in there. So I'm fine with Cozens. I think it's going to be a fine pick. For people who are concerned about it, I wouldn't be. I mean, there was talks he could have went through overall. So, so we'll see how that kind of develops and goes here. The one cautionary tale I'll give the Sabres is to not rush him. You don't need to force an 18-year-old center in your lineup. Let him go back to juniors. It'll be fine. It'll be okay. You can try again next year. I mean, maybe they'll give him a 9-game trial, but we've seen the movie before, with Nylander and even like Grigorenko, trying to force a player who's not ready into a spot. So there's no need to rush him here. So if he's not ready, send him back to juniors, and it's not a big deal at all. Johnson is a little bit of a different story. I don't really have a problem with the player itself. He's really good at getting the puck out of his zone. That's one of his strengths. His own exits. He's a nice skater. He moves the puck well, which is what you need in today's NHL. He's not going to give you a lot offensively, but that's not a big deal. You need good puck movers. You need players who can exit the zone. The Sabres definitely need zone exit defensemen, so that's fine. My problem is it's the second year in a row at almost the same exact spot. Last year was 32, where they took a defenseman with similar skill sets in Matthias Samuelsson and now Ryan Johnson, when there were other skilled, maybe you could say bigger project players, but maybe a higher ceiling two wingers on the board. Last year was Jonathan Berggren. This year there was Bobby Brink and a couple other guys. Kaliev was there, but I don't think he was ever on their radar. They didn't talk to him at development camp, and the one interaction the Sabres did have with them, from what I understand, wasn't very pleasant. So I don't think he was ever on their radar. But still, there were some other guys there they could have looked at, to help their skill on the wing, because they really don't have a lot there. And, coming out of this draft, they really don't have a lot either. Later rounds, a lot of European picks, which is kind of what Botterill does. So they seem to hit on those European kids. So until they don't hit on one or do a good job with one, I'm not going to really go after them about it.
Now, you picked up something right there at the end that I'm curious about, too, and wanted to get your thoughts on. So you get the center, you get the defenseman, but still the wing looks really shallow. What is there left for them to do? Is there a free agent out there that you have your eyes on that you want them to get? Is it just give Olofsson and Nylander a bunch of minutes and hope it works? What's in the cards for the Sabres here this year?
Yeah, I think Olofsson's going to be fine as like a left winger, top six player. He showed last year when he came over from Europe, he showed that he could still get his shot off. He could still score goals in the North American game. I don't think he's going to be like a 30-goal scorer in the NHL, but if you put him with Reinhart probably with Reinhart, I don't think it's going to be with Eichel with Skinner around, but if you put him with Reinhart, I don't think there's any reason he can't get you 20 to 25 goals and be a big part of your power play with that shot. So I have him penciled into my top six left wing. I'm not too worried about him. I think he'll be a good player for them, at worst a third line winger. So, that's good. Nylander's the question mark. I don't know. He showed some good things last year, but the catch with him is he needs a play driving center. When he did play with Eichel or played with Reinhart or even played with Sherry and Rodriguez, he was fine because they get him to move his feet, to be in the play, to to be involved basically because of the way they play the game, where when he played with other line mates that weren't that great, he disappeared. He was not noticeable. He doesn't move his feet. He doesn't drive the game on his own. So, there was some talk that he could be traded this summer. I would be against that for the right deal, but I don't know. Nylander was still a big question mark for me. Tage Thompson's still kicking around. I think he could start this season in Rochester, but how much Botterill likes him, so we'll see where that goes. But in free agency, there's some guys out there. I wrote about Richard Panik today. He's a 28-year-old right winger who could fit. Donskoy, you signed is another one as a right winger. I mean, that's primarily where they need the help is on the right wing. Where Anders Lee maybe is a nice idea, but he's a left winger, so that doesn't really help them that much. Gustav Nyquist, another guy who's a right winger. The only issue with him is I think he's turning 30 years old, so he's up there in age. So if the term isn't anything crazy, maybe that works for you. But there's really not a ton of depth beyond those three on the right side in free agency. So if he's not even getting involved in free agency, then he better have a good trade up his sleeve because especially move Reinhart to center. That right wing looks pretty rough.
So you mentioned that the big mistake with Cozens might be rushing him, but do you feel like the number of question marks at center might force management's hand? I don't know. I mean, we're not in the room to know. We're kind of spoofing that Reinhart would play center. Middlestat is still a question mark. It kind of feels like anyone playing second line center is a placeholder for Middlestat. So we know that the second line center in particular is the big question mark. And, fans are going to look at this shiny new, hey, he's a center. Hey, he's a first-round pick. Hey, he was 7th overall. Why isn't he the number 2 center? And not that fan pressure influences those types of decisions, but are you at all nervous that they may rush him or force him because of the need for that second/third line center?
Oh, I'm definitely nervous about it. That's why I said right at the bat they can't do it. Let's not kid ourselves. This isn't a team that's going to contend for a Stanley Cup next year. They need to be smart and also think about their future too. There's no need to rush the 18-year-old kid. You should have learned a lesson from Middlestat last year, right? You tried to shove Middlestat into a role that he wasn't ready for quickly, and you kind of got burned for it. And now you're going to go ahead and make the same mistake this season. It's not worth it. At worst case scenario, if you can't find a center, you want to keep Reinhart on the wing, you have Evan Rodriguez in this roster. He's played well at center. It's not your ideal second or third line center for the long-term future, but he can do it. He proved last year he can do it. You put him on the third line, put him with Sherry, you put him with other players. That's one good thing about Rodriguez, kind of that Swiss Army knife. We can play all 3 forward positions, and he can play them all pretty well. So, worst case scenario, you throw Evan Rodriguez at center again. Hopefully, that develops, and you go. But there's no need to make any panic rush moves with Cozens. Now, if Cozens comes out and looks fine and plays well in training camp and shows all the signs that he's good, he gets that 9-game trial and it works, then fine. But if it just doesn't look he's ready, there's no need to force feed it, basically.
Were you surprised by the lack of player moves by the Sabres? They did trade some picks around to get to guys that they wanted, but overall, with all the talks about potential trades, you mentioned Jason Zucker. The rumor is that he was traded, but Phil Kessel shot it down right last year. So you hear these names out there, and last year, I don't remember at what point in the offseason Skinner was traded for, but you had Sheary and Skinner come in, which were some pretty nice names. The Sabres haven't heard anything. Now, Botterill is a silent assassin. You don't generally hear these rumors,
right, yep.
But we haven't seen anything. I think everyone was kind of looking at draft day as that's when they're going to pull the trigger. The draft weekend came and went, and they did not make any personnel trades.
Yeah, the whole league, day one was a dud in general. There was really nothing, which was kind of disappointing. But day two, you had some moves there. You had Marlowe got traded, Subban got traded. So you had some moves there on day two, but I don't know. It's interesting. The Sheary trade last year was before the draft. The Skinner trade actually wasn't until August. You had the Ryan O'Reilly trade on July 1st. So that's kind of spread out your trades there. But I don't know. I guess I'm surprised. I thought he would do something. And the reason I think he thought he would do something is because of that 31st pick. So you didn't have a lot of assets going into this offseason. You basically had Ristolainen, 31, I guess Nylander and McCabe, if you really want it, as your main assets. But really your primary ones were 31 and Ristolainen. So now 31 is gone because you made that pick. So now your main focus is Ristolainen, but it seems like maybe there's a soft market on Ristolainen right now, at least until free agency ends. Somebody's going to give Tyler Myers a ton of money. It looks like it's going to be Vancouver, and they're going to regret that immediately. But I guess you can kind of circle back to the teams that lose in that Myers sweepstake in free agency and hope you can get a deal. Tampa Bay looks like a good team. There's a lot of smoke there, but they moved JT Miller. They got the Callahan thing, which say what you will, and it's tough for Callahan, but it's awfully convenient for Tampa Bay. So now they have room to sign Point, and there's not a lot of teams left. If Vancouver signs Myers, then they're essentially out of that discussion, and really it's down to a couple other teams that might be able to work. So I don't know. The trade chips are going quickly here, and I'm just hoping that Botterill's plan isn't to parade Jimmy Vesey for Jake McCabe trade as his big move of the offseason, because that'll be extremely disappointing.
Yeah, that leads into my last question, at least here. Now, though we move past the draft to free agency and the rest of the offseason, is there a move that you expect to see, or maybe something that you hope to see from this team before the roster is finalized for the next upcoming season?
For me, it's two things. And if you follow me on Twitter, you'll know what they are. It's not hard to know what they are. The one is I think Ristolainen has to go. You have to find someone. You have to find something. I understand you just don't want to give them away, but if you can get something of value back, you have to make the deal. I just can't. I can't hear the argument of a fourth coach coming in here. Maybe this will be the coach that fixes him. Well, it was supposed to be the last two. So I don't want to play that game again, because what's happened next summer is you have a defenseman who's going to be turning 26 years old. And if he doesn't work under Kruger, then teams are going to figure that out. Now this is the fourth coach that can't fix him, and his value goes down even more. So, you got to figure that out. And then the second thing for me, if it was really, it's getting close to my top of the list things, is you have to find a way. And I guess it goes hand in hand with Ristolainen trade. You have to find a way to get Colin Miller from Vegas. It seems like he's such a good player on the right side. His contract is cheap. It looks like Vegas is simply just trying to dump him. So it'll probably be a cheap deal. You might have to take David Clarkson with it, which is fine for a season. Just take it, eat it. But I don't know. I have this sick feeling in my stomach that he's going to go to Toronto, and it's going to be really aggravating, especially when he goes for next to nothing.
It's real quick for me on Ristolainen. You said he has to go. Do you think he has to go in terms of just because his play lately, or just because the value he'll fetch? And also in terms of fixing him, quote unquote, I personally, I'm a fan of the player. I don't think he's been put in the best situations here since he's been in the league. He came into the league with Ted Nolan as his coach, so he wasn't coached per se. And then he came in then Bilesma came in, and he was overcoached. And then it sounds like he kind of had a god complex, and just didn't put players in the right spot. And then Phil Housley, just if you watch the games, he didn't really coach defense. He was disaster defensively. So I think it's just a matter of him being put in the right situation / system to succeed.
Well, here's the thing with Ristolainen is it's a lot of the mistakes he made it's mental. He has trouble reading the play. He gets lost in the play a lot. That's something at 24, 25 years old that you should understand. So I mean, Howell's supposed to be the defensive coach. Bilesma was supposed to Stanley Cup winning coach, and there's just all these things. And again, his defensive coach this year is going to be the same coach he had last year in Steve Smith. So not like a lot's going to really change there. It's the passing, it's the breakouts. He is not good at it. He's actually one of the worst on the team 3 years running now. There's so many times where he just doesn't pick his head up. He can't read a play. He can't stay in a play. He gets lost. He takes himself out of plays just to hit somebody and leave somebody wide open, or he's standing next to the guy who puts the puck in the net. It's just so much mental mistakes that I don't think really, even if he goes to a different team. I mean, if he goes to a different team, they're going to put him probably in a limited situation where he plays less, so you're going to have less of those mistakes. But for me, I would rather somebody else pay him $5.4 million to be the third pair defenseman. I don't want to be that team. Because, and again, are you going to sell me that he's going to be the guy where this year is really going to be the year they're going to cut his minutes back? Okay, I'm sure. If they don't touch that defense, he's going to play 20, 25 minutes again. It's just because nobody else can really do it, especially if you're not going to have Pilot or Bogosian to start the season. So you're asking for trouble. And I think in Ristolainen's situation too, it's from the end of the season, kind of how he talked, I think maybe he's even ready for a change. So I just think for both sides, it's time to get away from it. And I get your point. He hasn't had good teammates. He hasn't had a lot around him the last 2 years. But to me, year 5, 400 and something games into his career, it comes off as excuse making, and I'm honestly done making excuses for him. He's 25 years old. This is the defenseman that he is, and somebody else can put him as their power play sheltered third pair defenseman because I just don't want to do it.
Well, you can follow Chad on Twitter. You can follow Die by the Blade on Twitter as well. Read everything that they're putting on. Always great Sabres content going year-round here as we approach free agency and get into the meat of the offseason coming up here. Chad, thanks so much for taking time here with us tonight, and we always enjoy having you on the show.
All right, guys, I appreciate it.
Well, thanks again to Chad for joining us here tonight on the show. It's always good to have him on. I know Steve has been itching for me to close the interview because Steve has strong and dissenting opinions on Rasmus Ristolainen, so why don't you just get right into it?
Well, first off, I respect Chad, and this is like I didn't like no hard feelings at all to what he says because he shares a lot of what he says. People want this guy gone, and my biggest thing about Rasmus Ristolainen is he's not a bad player. And a lot of people, Justin, I know you intelligently say if they trade him, he's going to fetch you good value, and that's why it's wise to trade him. But the number of people who are like, trade him because he's bad. No, he's not. Like, he consistently shows up on the score sheet. Now, a lot of times that is on the power play, but there's a reason that you are on the power play in that spot. And he obviously is producing. It's not like he's on the power play and not producing.
Sure.
He is showing up on the score sheet. And I know I sound super old school because I do like analytics, but when you watch him play, I feel like he passes the eye test. Like he plays well. We looked at shot charts when he's on the ice, how often shots come from the other side of the ice because teams don't try to shoot from in front of him. I'm not here to tell you he's a great player. I'm not here to tell you he should be their top right pair defenseman. I'm not here to tell you he should play power play 1. I'm saying keep a 26-year-old player who's pretty good because this hockey team doesn't have very many pretty good players. Let him play second pair. Let him play power play 2. Stop trying to ship this guy out as if he's like kicked you in the shins or something. I'm not ready to move on from Rasmus Ristolainen because I'm convinced that his late 20s and early 30s, he's going to be really good.
Justin, you hit on something there when we're talking to Chad about how many different coaches Rasmus has had in his career. And how many of those were very quickly jettisoned off by the Sabres?
The whole team has had this many coaches.
Yeah.
Like
Everybody's been around
he's not
since
the only player who's been struggling.
2011 or whatever.
What's that? He's the only player?
No, I said he's not the only player who's been struggling.
No. Like, I don't understand.
He's also been playing above where he really should be playing. I mean, if you put a second or third pair defenseman in your first pair, and we're all saying he's probably a second pair defenseman, but if you have to rely on a second pair defenseman to play your first pair, he's going to be out of position and look worse than he actually is. I mean, that's the whole thing. That's the whole thing with what people see in like Larson's. It's just he's overplayed where he really should be in the lineup at times, so people are expecting more from him than what he really is.
And so back to the coach thing, he comes in to the NHL with Ted Nolan as his coach. Right, so you're already you're already working off a kind of
The hardest working team in hockey.
Yeah, you're
right
kind of working off a
shot.
shit foundation. Like, that guy's not coaching going to be a great NHL defenseman.
He's coaching the 90s game.
And this is my theory. This is what it sounds like with Bilesma. Bilesma came in here and overcoached and had a very tight system. You had to play the system. It sounds like he overcoached and kind of had a god complex. It sounds like. So he's not. So it sounds like he's not putting the players in the best situation to succeed. He's like, you play this and that's what you're gonna play. All right. Bilesma's Stanley Cup winning coach though. So that's just my theory that I don't know if it's really been reported, but they made it sound like he kind of had a god complex when he was here. That's why him and Murray both let go. But then Halsey comes in, who's this defensive coach, defensive Hall of Famer, but offensively skilled defenseman. And the defensive core, the defensive play in this team was pitiful under Housley. It was god awful. And even in a Buffalo News article, Carter Hutton kind of ripped it up. God damn, the dog's got in here. And now Kruger, who's not known for his tactical ability, as also, but sounds like a player's guy who's going to communicate with the player, and sounds like he's got a guy who's going to put a player in the right position to succeed. He's going to, play. He's going to coach to the player, not coach to the system. So I don't think it's about a coach fixing him. I don't think Kruger's going to do it, but I just think it's about him being in the right situation.
So, just want to ask this question in general as we get into the discussion here. If Rasmus Ristolainen has another terrible year, would you guys both then kind of change your minds? If Kruger comes in and he continues to struggle, does that change your opinion on Rasmus?
Sure.
Yes.
But
do you also think that if he comes in and another coach sucks, that he has absolutely zero trade value?
Yes. And that's kind of the issue with him now. Like, I said it back if Myers was here and kind of starting to struggle. Like, trade him now. I know you want to see him pan out, but trade him while the iron's hot. Mm-hmm. And I think that's kind of the situation where they are right now. Like, trade him strike while the iron's hot. Because if he falters again this year, you're not going to get diddly-doo.
If you don't trade him this year, you don't plan on trading him necessarily ever, because you assume that he's going to become good and you just want to keep him. Mm-hmm. Which, if that's their intent, then they signed him for a long-term deal for a reason. He's on a very team-friendly number. He plays out to be a good player.
It's not like it's costing you $1 billion, and it's not like he's here for another 7 years.
It's not Ryan Suter.
Like Chad said, he does get caught out of position.
Oh, sure.
And I don't think it's so much of him getting lost in the play, though.
Well, what defenseman in this system hasn't?
But Jack, I think a lot of his issue is frustration. He puts himself out of position, trying to make the play by himself, and then gets caught out of position. And he's always usually on the ice with Jack Eichel, who is not great defensively. So he doesn't really have the front of the net presence.
And Scandella got railroaded for a full season.
Yes. So we'll see. It's hard to say, but it's the weird spot because the trade talk is kind of it's out there about him, and and he fails again. If he has another bad year, you're not going to be able to trade him and that contract.
No. But I'm not dumb enough to not realize that he is probably the best trade asset they have. You're not going to trade the other guys that would fetch value. I'm not stupid enough to sit here and be like, well, just trade someone else. I realize that he brings value. My concern is that defensemen in the NHL usually take a little longer, and then their late 20s can really start to bloom, and I don't want to see this kid go to another team and be their second pair defenseman and play really well like other players that they've traded away. And that's my worst fear, is that might happen, because I do think he has skills and sets and abilities, and I think he's a good defenseman.
There is evidence on the internet of the zone entries do not come from his side. There's heat maps. They're all red on the other side.
They all attack his partner the entire time.
And then most of the shots also come from that side.
And that was safe to say that was the beginning of last year, because we did that maybe in December or January, so it could have changed. But that's not a coincidence that the heat map chart for shots against are not on his side of the ice.
Mm-hmm. When coaches coach against these teams, they're going to coach around a player that we're signing. And they're going to, how are we going to make this player look good for the fans? You're going to do whatever you can to make him look bad, and that's going in. But they go away from him. They don't want to attack him, so they move away from him. Right? So you do that in brother hockey. This guy's a duster. Attack the left side, not the right side. Well,
yeah, I'm sure coaches know, especially after watching Scandella play a couple games last year. It's like, all right, we'll just go with that guy for a game. It worked every other time someone did it this season, so let's just continue to do it. Mm-hmm. Justin, unrelated. Justin has the 14-15 Sabres roster up behind him, and Jesus Christ, what a mess that was.
leading point scorer on.
This was one of our bracket entries.
Yes, it was.
Tyler Ennis, 46 points, 78 games.
Leading scorer on the team.
Score.
Also 37 penalty minutes, which is way up there.
This also may have been Zemgus' best year in the NHL.
Was that the year that he was an All-Star?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, it was his best year in the league by far.
The 15-15.
Bring back Ted Nolan.
What a stud.
Reignite Zemgus.
I know that they have to qualify Zemgus and Johan because that's how you keep their ability to they don't just become UFAs. You don't lose them for nothing. But man, oh man, just reading the news that you just qualified Larson and Gergensons within a couple hours just feels like, well, same old kind of deal for the Sabres. I know there's only so much they can do because they can't go out and sign all new players.
It's a total formality. Yeah, for sure. These probably two guys that might go to arbitration.
Yeah, Sabres want to pay them $5 and Larson wants $2 million. So they'll settle at 1 point.
Yeah, I'm not upset about that. It's a housekeeping thing at this point. You tender the offers and you can it just buys you more time where to go from here. It does open up the opportunity. If someone wants to offer Gergensons $11 million a year, the Sabres can then have 4 first-round picks.
Toronto's you know what, Mitch Marner, we've had enough of your strong-arm play. We're going to take your money and pay whoever this dart hits on the board. Oh, shit, it hit Z. Who's over there? All right, well, offer sheet Zemgus, Gergensons, Zach Parise. I don't know. There's not many players over there. Yeah, we got the names on this list. You got Marcus still here, Delorier still here, Zadorov was still here, so Grigorenko was probably still here.
Was that the year that Gianta, Foligno, and Ennis were their best forward line?
They were the best line here for 2 years.
Yeah. They were legitimately good too. It wasn't like they was just.
Yeah, Mazzaros.
It wasn't just because the other lines weren't good. They were good. They actually produced. But
Drew Stafford's still out there playing. The Eastern. If the Sabres are going to make the playoffs this year, it's not going to be easy because the teams that were drafting before them had the better picks. And it's an arms race. New Jersey goes and drafts number 1, and then they trade for PK Subban.
That's pretty good.
New York's been making a bunch of really smart moves, and then they draft Kepakaka number 2. I mean, it is not going to be easy to make the playoffs this year. I think I've settled in on what I want the Sabres to be able to accomplish. Make the playoffs or not make the playoffs, obviously I want them to make the playoffs. It's been fucking forever. But if they don't make the playoffs, I want to at least watch this team this season and be like, you know what? That was a team that went out and played complete 3-period hockey games. And, maybe they lost a couple more than they wanted to, but they didn't mail it in. And I feel like the last couple of years it's been mailed in left and right. And I want a team that I believe is giving their all on the ice every night.
I just keep putting my chips on Ralph Kruger's number. Mm-hmm. And that's either going to make me look stupid or I don't think it will. I really I just continue to go back to this because there's been so many years where this team has struggled, and there's a couple of possibilities. One is that all these players aren't good. That Kyle Oposo is never going to score 30 goals again, and guys like Saboka just forgot how to play all of a sudden because he wasn't huge in St. Louis, but he played a role and he was a decent player, and I think he was misused. And I'm not saying all these guys are going to have career years, but the possibilities are all the players are bad, or they've had a run of coaches who don't know how to work with them. I don't know what's more likely, but
I think it's a combination of both those things. But maybe now you find out who the real the players who can't be fixed are,
or you have a guy that can fix them all, which sounds crazy, but that was what Duffer was talking about. That and Kruger is self-proclaimed at saying, "Look, I'm going to sit down with every guy, and we're going to figure out how to get the most out of them." And that's you see it all the time in sports. When Latvia goes up against Canada and almost beats them, granted their goalie made 65 saves or something, but you see it happen. And I'm just saying, there's no reason why that can't happen. I'm not saying Kruger's going to fix it all, but I'm putting anybody that wants the Sabres to make the playoffs, I think we are putting our chips on Kruger fixing it.
Yeah, big ups to Latvian national goaltender Kristaps Godlevskis for that one really good game.
Yeah. They still lost though, so
yeah,
it really matter.
He tried. He and Ted Nolan and Zemgus tried their damnedest to win that game. Mm-hmm. Justin, what are you looking at over there? You got your Vladimir Sabatka numbers up?
Yeah, I'm looking at Sabaka's stats. I don't know why. He remember that article? He insinuated he's never played that role. He's more of an offensive guy. Mm-hmm. The dude barely scores his whole career. He's only had more than 10 goals once in the NHL. That was his last year in St. Louis with 11 goals. 31 points.
He,
In 81
he
games.
had that big 18-goal year in the KHL, though.
And he barely scored goals and put up points in the cage.
If you can't score in the KHL, you can't score anywhere.
I don't know. I just feel like for him, it doesn't matter whether you're being misused or not if you feel like you're being misused. Right?
Oh, yeah,
I know that sounds
all mental.
stupid.
Yeah,
that
sure.
sounds so stupid. But like maybe Saboka's his best role is the fourth line center taking defensive zone faceoffs. But if Kruger sits down with them and says, "Hey, man, this is what we're going to have you do. This is what we expect from you. This is why." It's when you expect to be playing second line and you get here and you're put on the fourth line. Right? Maybe I'm way off. Maybe I have no clue what I'm talking about. But it could be that maybe the expectations and what happened weren't the same. Not that what happened was necessarily the wrong thing. Right? Does that make sense?
I know what you mean. You had a really good quote on the show last week about Sabaka.
I did.
About someone being disgruntled in the workplace, and he said, "You know what I'm talking about?"
No.
I forget what he said. It was really.
It was so
really
good I forgot about it.
Yeah. Never mind though. But I was like, I'm to the point now because if this player's disgruntled, he's just gonna cause havoc in the locker room, you know, and it's just not good for anybody. You're gonna cost you. I think the bio calculator said it's gonna be 1.5 this year and 1 million next year to buy him out.
Worse than
Just sit on the contract. You have all the money this year.
But I'm just
give it to
gonna
me.
throw a chink in the locker room, you know.
Sure.
I don't know. It's not worth it. At that
I would
point.
guess that they don't think he's going to, because I think if they thought he was going to, they would get rid of him.
Well, they're not a smart team.
It goes
We've
back
learned
to
this.
Kruger though, because if Kruger sits
Kruger
down
will
with
fi-
him, if Kruger sits down and says, "Hey, Vlad, here's your role. Here's what we expect," and he says, "Fuck that," then they buy him out. And if he says, "Here's your role. Here's what we expect," he goes, "Okay, coach." Then don't be disgruntled because, I don't know.
I kind of think that's what the logic behind the Ryan O'Reilly deal was last year. That you kind of had, you would like a player like O'Reilly in your locker room, but if the fact is, and we don't know what's going on in his mind, but if he didn't want to be here, and if they thought he was going to be a problem in the locker room, why not move him to get him another change of scenery?
Also, we can say what we want about the trade, but was Ryan wrong? Like, he was right about this team. We didn't improve. We got almost worse in spite of ourselves. And if he was
I mean, on
here, he
paper,
would have
this
continued to be
team's-
miserable.
On paper, this team should have been a lot better than they were.
Well, sure, but that's been true for how many years in the history of Buffalo sports? We say that every year about the Bills and the Sabres.
so-
This team could maybe see you get to the playoffs. Well, yeah, I've been saying that every year since I was born in '91. Like, come on, guys, let's be real here.
So you said a bit ago you don't know what you know what you want the Sabres this year or this upcoming season. And what I want on the season is this off season. You need to get this roster better, not for this upcoming year, but for the following year. So you're not expected to do much next year. Like, you're probably not. You know, but next year, like we talked about it last week, next year's the final year of Dowling's ELC. You kind of want to mix. You want to at least get to the playoffs.
You got to maximize what
You got to maximize. Yes, it's a super value contract, and I don't think people they talk about Joe Pavelski. He's old now. He puts up points still as an old guy, but how is he going to help this team next year? I know they're not making a cup run next year, but getting to the playoffs, get to the dance. I don't know. I don't think it's a right signing. If you're going to sign him for all the money, he'll be 36, 37 next year.
I have a hard time seeing Pavelski not in San Jose.
He won't come here. He won't come here.
All those guys are West Coast boys.
Sorry, not trying to make the hard turn, but you brought it up. UFA, the conversation started today, correct? 1 week prior to July 1st.
I just heard Sabres reached out to his camp, but he's not scheduled to come here.
Pavelski?
Joe,
Yeah.
So what about other guys? What about Ryan Zingle? What about Jonas Donskoy?
Well,
what about Wayne Simmons?
Now, to go back to the beginning of our conversation with Chad, we had showed him, had given Donskoy a 5x5. He's like, I think that's a little rich unless you have to pay him a little more to come here. I think that's part of the conversation. Not just because it's Buffalo, but because we have a very negative losing culture in that locker room right now. And if you are an incoming free agent, do you look at Ryan O'Reilly and be like, that guy was there, he was miserable and hated playing hockey, had terrible numbers, left for 1 year, and won the Conn Smythe Trophy? I think you do have to pay a premium, whether it's to Donskoy or to Simmons or to Zingle or whoever it is that they're going after. I have no idea. You have to pay a little bit more than market value to get them over here.
Yeah, that's the thing. You're gonna have to pay for someone to come here, and it's gonna be someone that's worth overpaying for the next 4 or 5 years.
It's like, for me, a guy I like a lot is Brandon Peary from Las Vegas. Now they're one of the few teams left with terrible cap. Tampa got out of theirs a bit. Toronto got rid of Marlowe. Vegas still has no money. Brandon Peary is a
Vegas
guy
is
who's
over because they saw 81.5 and shit a brick, right?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
100%.
Absolutely. And they were already having trouble if the number was higher.
Right. If the number was 83, they were still over. But then they saw
they had
81 and a
plenty of
half,
Carlson.
and we're like, oh.
See that rumored Carlson contract?
That's not bad for them,
That's
actually.
a great price for that.
It's a really good deal.
Yeah.
Which helps them. But, I mean, you got to Brandon Peary's been on a two-way deal with them. He came up, had a pretty good goal-scoring season. But he's the kind of guy, he might want to really prove himself in the NHL. He might want a one-way deal. Maybe you pay him a little bit more. I like the idea of getting hungry guys in. We've been trying to make the splash free agent move the last couple times. Pozo's a splash free agent move. Molson was a splash free agent move. Maybe instead of worrying about the Dzingels and Matt Duchene's, maybe we just go with the Brandon Pearys of the world.
Are you ready for this? This will make you chuckle a little bit. If you knew this already, you can yell at me. Dion Phaneuf gets bought out.
Mm-hmm.
Right? $7 million cap hit last year. You know who's paying half of that money?
Ottawa?
The Senators. They retained his salary, and because they retained salary in the trade, which was to Calgary, correct? Or from Calgary to
Calgary to Ottawa
to
to Toronto?
That's
to
right.
LA?
Yeah, so either way, it wasn't direct from Ottawa to LA, was it? I don't know.
I would have to
It'd be even funnier if there was a stop in the middle, but regardless, the Kings are like, we'll buy him out. We only got to pay half of it anyway. So they buy just Ottawa. I know the Sabres haven't been good in a long time, but they just continue to be a laughingstock because now they're paying money. Not only are they paying money to a player that's not there, they're paying buyout money to a player they did not get to choose to buy him out. Like, it's no skin off their back. It's no different. It's just hilarious that they're retaining salary for a player that got bought out.
I mean, we're still paying Cody Hodgson, so I have a hard time judging. It is almost done, thanks.
So one thing that frustrated me about draft day was so the Devils made some nice moves. They drafted Jack Hughes, then they traded for PK Subban a bit later.
Give up very little.
Yeah, I was going to say, for
very
not
little.
much.
And
They just gave Nashville the money to sign
I
Matt
saw a couple
Duchene.
people, sorry, go ahead, Mike.
Yeah, I was looking at that deal, and I was wondering what such of the disparity between what Nashville gave up in Subban and what New Jersey gave up, how that deal got approved by the NHL.
I mean, it's a salary dump deal. They need to re-up Roman Josi, who's another elite defender, and I think that their intentions for signing Matt Duchene are very, very transparent at this point.
Because Subban's cap hit, even though he's not making that much, his cap hit is $9 million a year.
And he's the only player who's been traded twice with on draft day with a $9 million cap
So,
hit?
yeah, he broke the record. Did you send that to us? He
I
broke
did,
the
yeah.
record for the highest valued player traded.
He was the record.
He was the record, and the other player was Shea Weber, who he was traded for, like the next highest player to be traded at like $7.8 million.
So
Just stupid hockey stats that we sit around and love.
So back to my original point about, so you see on Sabres Twitter kind of started going off like, Devils make a rebuilding look easy. Meanwhile, Sabres are the Sabres. And I even saw a meme like, it was a meme like Sabres on top and it said, rebuilding takes time. And then like Devils below it says, well, our work here is done. And then, I got a little frustrated with that. I thought it was pretty inaccurate because when Tim Murray was here, and Tim Murray did that.
He hit the accelerator.
He traded for Evander Kane. He traded for Ryan O'Reilly.
Robin Leonard, first round pick.
And maybe not a great deal, but who's just won a Vezina?
Right. But he was mortgaging the future. He was mortgaging the future for the right now. That's what you're getting to. Because he traded JT Compher. He traded.
And he didn't trade that much.
Brendan Lemieux.
Maybe the biggest piece traded was Compher. Not proven yet.
Myers,
Compher
probably. People would probably say Myers.
Myers didn't go beat the world in Winnipeg. Brendan Lemieux's been traded now to New York. He's done. He's just racking up.
He didn't even sign here.
He traded Brandon McNabb.
I mean, he's been
I think the Sabres did that, and it just didn't work. Unfortunately, I mean, so I just thought it was kind of a.
And I mean, and everyone who's saying that New Jersey Devils team hasn't hit the ice yet. A little preemptive. Now, having PK Subban on your team makes you a lot better. But if you don't win a Stanley Cup, does it matter?
Now at this point, do you even think the Devils trade Taylor Hall? They let him go to the free agency. Maybe
they probably wait till the deadline.
Let him go to the deadline.
Right.
See
where they're at.
Yeah.
Does what Columbus did this year make teams a little more willing to just go for it? Because Columbus had that with Panarin. They're like, you know what? We're a buyer. Fuck that. We're going to go and get Duchene and Dzingel. Yeah. And they made a real good run for it. I think there's...
Kekalainen probably saved his job.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Absolutely did. He had to. If that team flamed out, he's fired immediately. No chance about it. But I mean, New Jersey now, if they get to the deadline, like, we're a playoff team. Taylor Hall may not be here next year, but, we'll sell some playoff tickets at Prudential Center while we're on our way out here. Just go for it.
They did decide, we got the last year's superstar player. We're going to pick up other guys in the trade market. Maybe they'll make a run at a couple free agents.
Yep. Hall in a contract year and healthy after this injury. Healthy and in a contract year. He might light the world on fire.
And they still have all that money because they're not paying Hischier or Hughes yet.
Yep.
Basically at all.
So both will be on the roster next year for sure, probably.
Yeah, Hischier was pretty good at points this year already.
Yeah.
He's a real
Really
good player.
good.
Is it? It's I don't know. I think after a few weeks in free agency, I think we have a conversation about Botterill and what he's done so far. Because if he didn't fleece the Hurricanes for Skinner, what else has he done? And he traded a Conn Smythe player for nothing.
Depends on didn't he draft UPL? So if Uka works out, that's big.
Okay.
If
But that will take time to figure out.
Sure.
Yeah.
If Sherry becomes a 25 goal scorer,
He got great value out of Middlestat, I guess.
depends. I mean, you're right.
But, and then he traded Kane.
He drafted Rasmus Dahlin.
I don't think they're even going to re-sign Danny O'Regan.
I would have fucking drafted. Anyone would have drafted Rasmus Dahlin.
There was sarcasm in my voice, Jeff.
I don't know if they traded Kane for O'Regan. Are they even going to re-sign O'Regan? He's a UFA. He's not even an RFA.
I'm not upset with Bots at this point at all. I'm not. I think he had to get out from
I'm
under
not
what
upset. I'm
he
saying
had to
it's
get
something to
out
be
from
talked
under
about
what
soon.
Murray did. He had to get out from under what Murray did. He didn't have first round pick because Leonard, was traded. He lost another lottery, right? Didn't he his first year lose the lottery when it wasn't Dahlin? It was the Middlestat. I don't know, but I'm not.
It's a
ready.
conversation that's on the horizon.
It's on the
I don't
I'm saying
think.
it's on the
I don't
horizon.
think he's on the hot seat.
No,
I don't.
No, I mean that's the thing.
There are people that do. I don't think Jason Botterill.
You called him a cerebral assassin earlier.
a silent assassin.
A silent assassin? I don't think assassin is the right word, but he's definitely silent. But I think the Botterill's track record, the track record is with Pittsburgh is they both the draft, and I think they're just going to be real patient with what they got, which is boring. Tim Murray was exciting because he made trades.
Sure.
He was not afraid to make a trade. Maybe set the team back a bit. I don't think he did that much because he didn't trade away that much.
The reason I called him silent, though, when the Sabres traded for O'Reilly, I remember hearing that for months. He's going to be on the block. It would be as if they trade for Zucker because we've heard that for so long.
Yeah.
The Skinner deal, nobody saw coming. Maybe you guys.
Nope.
Same thing with Sherry, which was to a smaller level, but those are two names that I recognized immediately, and all of a sudden it's this guy's a Sabre? Yeah. So he seems to keep things under wraps pretty well. I didn't necessarily mean the assassin part, but the silent part. But regardless, he's I'm not putting him on the hot seat. There are people who are, and I'm not there yet. And it's not because I like the guy. He hasn't given us reason to defend him. Risto, I like him. I defend him because I feel like he's given us reason to like him. I don't feel that way with Bots, but I'm not shortening his leash right now.
I think if they have a non-playoff season this year, which I'm kind of thinking they may be closer to a non-playoff team than a playoff team, I think it's all going to depend. His future is going to depend on how he handles next offseason.
I think that's a good point.
Because this is only his second offseason with the second.
He just finished his second season as GM.
So yeah,
Third offseason. This is his third offseason.
Because they fired Murray and Bilesma and brought in Housley and Botterill before the 2017-2018 season. No. Yeah, that's right. Good grief. I'm an idiot. I don't know.
Yeah, it's all these losing seasons are starting to run together.
They really do. It's tough. I feel if you're a Patriots fan, you remember exact games, exact seasons. I remember that Week 13 game in 2014 when Tommy threw that touchdown. If you're a Bills fan, I went to my first Bills game in I don't know, was it 2007 or 2015? They lost. I don't know. Feels like it's all the same over here.
That's pretty funny.
Thank you. I have a couple of good ones to show, and the show's almost over. Thank God, because I don't have any more. I think it's an incomplete for him, and it's definitely a conversation we're going to have soon.
We're going to have soon.
Great grade, Jeff.
I do.
Great grade. The incomplete.
Yeah, it's an incomplete, at least until we get to free agency. Now, if it goes up to free agency and nothing happens again, and Chad's right. You don't want to look at that exact same roster and be we have nothing on the wing still. Mm-hmm. So I hope it's something.
With the lack of movements, look at the lack of movements at the draft, which I expected to trade. I think something's going to happen at the draft for this team.
I mean, we were talking Ristolainen and 7 for Hall or Zucker or somebody was. I mean, we were thinking there were going to be moves, and it's a little disappointing that there were none. So, he kind of does need to do something in the offseason to address this team's needs.
I forgot what I was saying now. I lost it.
And if he doesn't change the roster, Ralph Kruger's going to fix everybody, and this team is winning the President's Trophy.
Nylander could have a 20-goal year. He shows a skill.
Sure.
Middlestat has shown flashes of he can be a great player when he fills out and
Middlestat, Thompson, and Nylander are going to be phenomenal. They're going to combine for 100 goals.
And that's what's so frustrating about these young players. Like, none of them are lost causes. Like, you can watch Tage and Casey.
People are so ready to move on from these 21-year-old guys.
Risto, and you're like, you know what? They've really struggled, but I can still see something. And at some point, it just has to happen, or it won't.
I'm very confident about Tage Thompson. I was upset about how he played last year because he made mistakes trying to play his game. And I like to see that from a player. He's going to play his game. He's going to be a unique player. He's not going to be a pawn in the system.
I didn't like him in his own end.
He shows skill. He shows a lot of skill. And he's 6'5" and creates space with like very skilled move for a 6'5" player. He skates well for a 6'5" player.
His forechecking's unreal because he forces turnovers in the offensive zone. I don't like him in his own end. What he needed is a coach to maybe keep him out of that situation. But you know how it is. The old school way is like you got to learn how to play defense. You got to play a 200-foot game. That's true eventually. But how about your 21-year-old kid who's like a deer in the headlights still? Isn't being forced into the third line role where he's expected to take defensive zone faceoffs. I don't know. I don't know.
They're probably never going to win the O'Reilly trade, but they could lose it less. You know, if Tage turns out to be a good player, it takes a lot of the bite off of it. I think you already lose. The guy wins the Conn Smythe his first year in St. Louis, you lose the trade.
He won like 4 trophies last year.
But if Tage turns out to be a pretty good player.
You see the big fuck you to the Blues Twitter? We didn't have a 31st pick this year, but then it's like, oh my God.
It's funny. Just imagine having this conversation in January when the Blues were last in the league. You're like, oh man, we hosed those guys, got a number 1 pick. We got Thompson, maybe something. At that point, it didn't matter how good O'Reilly was playing. And it's amazing how 5 months changed that so drastically.
The Sabres got Binningtoned.
We did. We got blocked on Twitter.
Jerk. Freaking jerk. I was going to say something else. I lost one. I did disagree with Chad on one thing in an interview. I do think Victor Olsson is going to be a 30-goal scorer in this league. Think about this power play because he has an elite shot. There's one. You cannot tell me anything. He's an elite
bananas.
Shot. How good if you're going to put him on a power play with Eichel on his off wing, Darlene at the tip of the triangle.
Point, yep.
And then Olsson on his offhand on the other side.
And then Sam in front.
Who do you defend? Yeah, that's Sam in front. Who do you defend? And then you get a Skinner down low somewhere doing his Skinner thing.
Doing his whirling dervish.
Thanks, Steve.
You're welcome.
Great minds think alike. Tyler Taylor stinks. Yeah, like who do you defend on that? Like you got to pick someone to defend at the top of that power play. And that's
certainly having Olofsson makes it much more difficult to defend the other guys because now you can't just shade to Eichel's
I want to talk about a mind-boggling thing that, you know, this team was really good on the power play 3 years ago, and then it just completely... They were the number 1 power play in the league, and then it just evaporated, and that doesn't make sense. Something changed or something.
And they didn't even have great personality, per se.
No.
I think they better
when they were a really bad team.
Their power play
when they were a
huge
last
outlier.
place team. They were first in the league in power play, operating at some 21%.
The one thing I hate about their power play is that it's very stationary. I guess they make it work. They move the puck well, but
it could have been because their offensive guys were so well rested because they spent the whole game playing defense. But who knows?
It's spicy today, Jeff.
I know. Can't help it. I'm not even drinking tonight, guys. I'm just feeling naturally spicy.
Why are all 3 animals in the warmest room in the house?
No. They're enjoying cooling off in the hot room. Justin tried to block the door with a chair, and slowly but surely, the animals from the smallest one to the big German Shepherd have figured out their way to get around this chair. Kira's very proud of herself.
Well, I had to keep the door open because we dying here.
Oh,
that's fair.
Central Air's coming Wednesday.
It's a big day.
Getting my ducts clean on Thursday.
Nice and
not
cool
trying to
here.
one up you there, but
I'm just glad I got power back.
We should do a show next Monday, right? Because it's gonna be free agency.
Yeah, we'll do a show next Monday.
So
Noon.
we've been going hard this offseason.
It's
We've had
gonna
a
be
break.
good.
So
It's been good. It's a good show
here.
Technically, guys, all 4 of us would qualify in the NHL to be unrestricted free agents because of our age, and so maybe one of us will get signed.
I'm available if anyone wants to call me. I'll take league men.
I did not get drafted this year. I am a free agent.
Sign a 2-way. You know, I'm down to do whatever has to be done.
I joked with Dietrich a couple of years ago. I said, if you need a fat, slow, old, left-handed shooter, I'm available at the draft. He goes, I don't need to draft your ass. You're a free agent. I'm like, all right, perfect. So it was great. It was.
Well, if everyone from the Bandits can't make the game, and they have to, the only choice is not field a team or play Steve. I know who he's going to call.
He's going to not play. We'll take the L, and Steve is not stepping on the floor.
Forfeit.
Tomorrow, rosters are due for expansion draft protection in the NLL.
Well, they actually, I think we're today, right?
I think it was tomorrow.
They went
at noon.
in today.
Well, the reveal tomorrow.
Correct. If I have this correct, they were due at noon today, and the reveal is supposedly tomorrow at noon.
So keep an eye on that, Bandits fans.
Be
Interesting to see because there's going to be some pretty good forwards who just will not.
Right.
This is a numbers game.
The toughest part. It used to be you could protect a certain number of runners, a certain number of goalies. Now it is 5 forwards and 1 goaltender are the limits. You can protect as many transition or defensive players as you want. Interestingly enough, they tried to list Matisse as a defender because he played out the back door most of this year, but all of his career he's played forward. So that was actually submitted to the commissioner, and I'm not sure what he decided. So the commissioner could rubber stamp that Kyle Matisse was in fact a transition player, and for all intents and purposes, they could protect 6 forwards if that's the case. So anyways.
We did not have an FC Buffalo guest on here tonight. They played a very hot game at Pittsburgh yesterday, and it did not go very well for the team. Bryce Tremuda's shutout streak finally got broken. It was kind of the same start to the game that we had here, except for Pittsburgh got one in early instead of being stonewalled by Tremuda. I believe it was a 4-1 final.
1-1 at the half. 1-1 at the half, and then the Hotspurs. Congrats to them on their first win. Right, as a new team this year, it's their first win in the NPSL. So, but unfortunately, it comes at the hands or comes over the FC Buffalo Blitzer. So they'll look to get back on the horse on Saturday.
And they're back on home field here on Saturday, where they have been dynamite
Cleveland,
so far
correct?
this season against Cleveland. So we'll be there for that. So if you can't be there, find the broadcast available on Twitter find it through Twitter on Mike Cujo, which is a really awesome little streaming site that the NPSL is partnered with. Justin's dogs are fighting in front of me.
Cujo.
Speaking of Cujo, Kira's reminding that she is the bigger dog.
Zoe doesn't care though.
Well, it's always the little dogs that have the most fight.
Napoleon
You guys are
complex.
truly legendary.
Which is why Cole Caulfield's going to be a great hockey
You
player.
guys are commentating my dogs fighting right now. You guys can't stop.
Sorry, comes so naturally. Anything else, guys? Before we put a tail on this one.
I got nothing.
Well, thanks all so much for listening. You can find our show on Facebook at 716 Sports Podcast, on Twitter at 716 Sport Podcast. We are on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Podbean, Stitcher, whatever it is you like to plug into your ear holes. We will be on it. We'll be back next week talking about some free agency. Hopefully some free agency news, some sort of move, anything at all. Hopefully
Solid
comes
rumor
faster
at
than the Sabres
minimum.
coaching news we tried to do for 4 weeks and nothing fucking happened, so we'll have something for you, hopefully. Until then, again, thanks to Chad and thanks to Coach for coming on here with us tonight. It was an awesome show, full of stuff, and we'll see you again next week.